The Apostle Paul wrote his letter to the Philippians sometime in the year 60 or 61 CE. What prompted the letter? A gift that was sent from the congregation to Paul in Rome and carried by Epaphroditus. The letter, as we read it, is characterized by commendation and multiple expressions of appreciation for the generous, self-sacrificing spirit of the congregation in Philippi. The words of today's text are actually part of a prayer that the Apostle Paul said in behalf of the Philippians. We can read it together in Philippians chapter 1. So we invite you to turn there, find the verse, Philippians chapter 1. You'll notice in verse 9, Paul says, "This is what I continue praying." And then the prayer is actually comprised of three elements. The second, in verse 10, that you may make sure of the more important things, plural. Why? So that you may be flawless and not stumbling others up to the day of Christ. Well, it's a beautiful prayer, but a natural question would be, what are the more important things? It's true, isn't it, that priorities can be determined by circumstances. And Jehovah's people around the earth have a broad range of circumstances. But there are some priorities that are common to Jehovah's people no matter where we live, whether in Argentina or Zambia or someplace in between. There are some things that all of us have in common. Can you think of some? The sanctification of Jehovah's name, the outworking of his purpose, the unity of the congregation. Those are important things to all of us. In this letter, how did the Apostle Paul help the brothers and sisters in Philippi, and how did he help you and me determine what things are more important? Well, I thought for a few minutes we could consider two related qualities mentioned by Paul in this letter. And in doing so, we'll discern that they are certainly among the more important things to all of us. The first is mentioned in Philippians chapter 2. So let's look at it together. Philippians chapter 2, verse 3. Paul says, "Do nothing out of contentiousness or out of egotism, but with humility consider others superior to you." Humility. It's a beautiful quality. Why would it be among the more important things? Because humility is an essential ingredient of unity and peace. And the unity of the congregation is important to all of us. What is it? What is humility? Well, the footnote gives us some insight. It says, "or lowliness of mind." So humility is actually a state of mind. It's how we perceive ourselves in relation to others. How did Jesus perceive himself in relation to others? Well, he said, "I came not to be served, but to serve." And really, that has to be our mindset, doesn't it? Whether here at Bethel, we see ourselves as part of a family, working together, shoulder to shoulder. In the congregation, we see ourselves as part of the congregation, working shoulder to shoulder. If we serve as an elder, how do we perceive ourselves? With lowliness of mind. We acknowledge we're a fraction of a scriptural entity. And we have many opportunities throughout the day to demonstrate lowliness of mind. For example, we're all descendants of Adam. We all make mistakes, but does it take humility, lowliness of mind to acknowledge a mistake? Yes. Does doing so contribute to peace and unity? Without doubt. An apology. Does it take humility to apologize? And especially if we think the other party is more responsible or at least equally responsible for a tense situation? Yes. But for the sake of peace, we may determine that a humble approach is best. We demonstrate humility in many other ways throughout the course of a day. And in so doing, we promote peace, we promote unity, and demonstrate that we're making sure of the more important things. Now, a closely related quality is mentioned by Paul in chapter 4 of his letter. Let's look together at Philippians chapter 4, verse 11. He says, "Not that I am saying this because I am in need, for I have learned to be self-sufficient, regardless of my circumstances." So Paul had learned a secret to be self-sufficient. What does that mean? Well, again, the footnote helps us. Or content. Paul learned the secret of contentment. Now, the context of his words makes clear that he's discussing material provisions specifically. But there were other reasons that contentment was important. What were Paul's circumstances when he wrote to the Philippians? That's what he says. I have learned to be content regardless of my circumstances. Well, Paul's circumstances were imprisonment. He was a prisoner in Rome. And in Acts chapter 28, we read that he lived in a hired house. We know that he could share in the ministry to a limited extent. He was able to write letters to friends and to congregations. That doesn't sound so bad. But in his letter to the Philippians, Paul mentions prison bonds. In his letter to the Ephesians, written in the same time period, he mentions chains. Evidently, Paul was chained to a Roman guard. His movement was limited, a challenging circumstance. He could have become negative. He could have thought to himself, I'm not fulfilling my assignment as an apostle to the nations. But instead, he focused on what Jehovah allowed him to do, and in the process, contributed to the outworking of Jehovah's purpose. It's a good lesson for all of us. Years ago, when Abby and I were first married, we pioneered in a rural area. It was challenging, and we were there for a number of years. There was a time when we became anxious and discontent. There were a number of reasons. Other pioneers encouraged us to move. With the best of motive, they said, move to a city where you can learn some valuable lessons. But an older brother gave us some beautiful advice and encouraged us to learn the secret of contentment. He may have saved our spiritual lives. We learned much in that assignment, and right down to today, we draw on the lessons that Jehovah taught us. Well, all of us can learn contentment, and we can cultivate humility. If we do, then we can be confident of Jehovah's blessing as we continue to make sure of the more important things.